The stars had always called to humanity. For centuries, people looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what waited beyond. They built rockets. They built space stations. They pushed further and further until one day, they finally broke through the last barrier. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy. The colony ship Adamant and Hope carried 10,000 souls. Farmers, scientists, soldiers, teachers, and children. They left Earth behind, searching for a new home among the stars. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge and watched as Station Nexus 7 grew larger on the view screen. It was a massive structure, bigger than any city on Earth. Thousands of ships moved around it like insects around a hive. "We made it," whispered Lieutenant Chen, her voice full of wonder. Elena nodded slowly. After 3 generations of travel, humanity had finally reached civilized space. The Galactic Council controlled this region. 347 different alien species lived together in peace. Humanity would be species number 348, but Elena felt something cold in her stomach. The Council had sent them a message before they arrived. The message contained rules. Many rules. And one rule stood above all others. The disarmament accord. No guns. No explosives. No weapons that used fire or chemicals to launch projectiles. The Council had banned all such weapons 12,000 years ago. Any species that wanted to join the galactic community had to give up these tools of war. "Captain," said the communications officer, "we are being hailed. They want us to dock at Platform 12. Elena straightened her uniform. "Tell them we comply. All senior staff, meet me at the main airlock in 1 hour." The docking was smooth. The airlock opened with a hiss, and Elena got her first look at the aliens who ruled the galaxy. Ambassador Thelvora stood at the front of the welcoming party. She was a Scythian, a species that looked almost human except for their blue skin and 4 arms. Behind her stood soldiers made of living crystal. These were the Vethrani peacekeepers, the enforcers of galactic law. "Welcome to civilized space," said Thelvora. Her voice was cold and formal. "We have reviewed your ship's manifest. You carry prohibited items. This is unacceptable." Elena kept her face calm. "We carry weapons for defense. Space is dangerous. Surely you understand. We understand that primitive species often cling to violent tools." Thelvora raised one of her 4 hands. "The disarmament accord exists for a reason, Captain. It has maintained peace for 12,000 years. Your kind will surrender all firearms, all explosives, and all chemical propellants. This is not a request." The Vethrani peacekeepers stepped forward. Their crystal bodies hummed with energy. Elena had read the reports. These beings could detect gunpowder residue from orbit. They could sense the chemical signature of a single bullet from a kilometer away. There was no hiding weapons from them. "And if we refuse?" Elena asked quietly. Thelvora's dark eyes showed no emotion. "Then you will not be permitted to enter Council space. You will be turned away. Your colony ship will drift alone in the void until your food runs out and your people starve. The choice is yours, Captain." Elena looked at her crew. She saw fear in their eyes. They had traveled for 3 generations. They had sacrificed everything. And now they were being told to give up their only means of protection. "We will comply," Elena said. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. The next few hours were painful. Soldiers carried crates of rifles to the airlock. Pistols, shotguns, grenades, and ammunition. Everything humanity had brought to defend itself. The Vethrani scanned each item and then threw it into an incinerator. Elena watched years of manufacturing, of careful engineering, turn to smoke and dust. The crew stood in silence. Some had tears in their eyes. Others looked angry. Lieutenant Chun clenched her fist so hard her knuckles turned white. "This is wrong," she whispered to Elena. "How are we supposed to survive out here with nothing?" Elena had no answer, but one man was not watching the destruction. Master Sergeant James Okonkwo had slipped away from the crowd. He moved through the ship's corridors until he reached Cargo, Bay 7. This bay had been marked as recreational equipment on the manifest. The Vethrani scanners had checked it briefly and moved on. After all, what threat could sporting goods pose? Okonkwo opened the largest crate. Inside, wrapped in cloth, lay a compound bow. It was beautiful. Carbon fiber limbs, titanium risers, and a draw weight that would make ancient warriors weep with envy. Next to it lay a quiver of arrows. Each arrow was tipped with tungsten steel, sharp enough to punch through body armor. He picked up the bow and drew the string back. The familiar tension felt good in his hands. His father had taught him to shoot. His grandfather had taught his father. The Okonkwo family had been archers for generations, keeping the old traditions alive even as the world moved on to rifles and missiles. "No propellants," he said softly to himself. "No explosives. No chemical reactions." He smiled, and it was not a kind smile. They said nothing about muscle and steel. The other crates held more weapons. Crossbows with mechanical triggers. Longbows made of laminated wood and carbon fiber. Thousands of arrows with different tips for different purposes. Broadheads for cutting. Bodkins for piercing armor. Explosive tips that used mechanical force, not chemicals. Everything legal under the Council's ancient laws. Okonkwo had seen this coming. When the first transmissions from the Council arrived years ago, he had read the Disarmament Accord carefully. He had found the loophole. The law banned projectile weapons that use fire or chemical reactions. It said nothing about projectile weapons that use tension, torque, and human strength. He closed the crate and walked back to join the others. Captain Vasquez was speaking with Ambassador Thelvara, signing documents that would make humanity a member of the galactic community. A member without guns. A member without any apparent way to fight back. The other species on the station watched the humans with amusement. These newcomers were weak. They had given up their weapons without a fight. They would be easy prey for pirates, slavers, and criminals who prowled the edges of Council space. Let them think that, Okonkwo thought. Let them believe we are helpless. He touched the calluses on his fingers, earned from years of drawing a bowstring. Humanity had been killing each other for 10,000 years before gunpowder was invented. They had conquered nations with swords and spears. They had built empires with arrows and siege weapons. The bow was humanity's oldest friend in war, and the galaxy was about to remember why. The Adamantine. Hope departed Station Nexus 7 3 days later. Captain Vasquez set course for the outer colonies, where Council law was weak and opportunities waited for those brave enough to take them. Behind them, the aliens of the station returned to their lives, already forgetting about the primitive newcomers. They would not forget for long. Keller's moon was not a beautiful place. The sky was always gray. The ground was rocky and hard. Wind howled through the canyons at night, carrying dust that got into everything. But it was far from the Council's watchful eyes, and that made it perfect. The humans built their settlement in a valley between two mountain ridges. They worked fast, raising walls of stone and metal. They dug wells and planted crops in greenhouses. Within 3 months, the colony of New Haven had taken shape. 500 humans called it home. Captain Elena Vasquez walked the walls every morning. She looked out at the barren landscape and wondered what dangers lurked beyond the horizon. The outer colonies were lawless places. Pirates and slavers operated freely here, preying on the weak. "They will come eventually," said Okonkwo. He stood beside her, a bow slung across his back. "Word is already spreading about us. A new colony with no weapons. Easy pickings. Elena nodded grimly. How many archers do we have? 200 trained. Another 100 learning. Okonkwo turned to face her. I have been teaching them day and night. They are getting good. But we have never faced a real battle. Let us hope we are ready when it happens. They did not have to wait long. The Dreith Syndicate controlled this sector of space. They were massive reptilian creatures, standing 3 meters tall with scales like armor and claws that could tear through steel. For centuries, they had collected tribute from every settlement in the region. Those who refused to pay were enslaved or killed. Warlord Skarn led the syndicate. He was the largest Dreith anyone had ever seen, with scars covering his body from countless battles. When he heard about the human colony, he laughed. A new species without weapons? They would learn their place quickly. Skarn's ship landed outside New Haven on a cold morning. 50 Dreith warriors marched toward the gates, their plasma whips crackling with energy. The council banned guns, but they allowed these weapons. Plasma whips could not kill from a distance, after all. They were tools for punishment and control. Elena met them at the gate. She stood alone, her hands empty. Skarn looked down at her with yellow eyes. His tongue flicked out, tasting her scent. You are the leader of these creatures? I am Captain Elena Vasquez. This is our home, no. Skarn's lips pulled back to show rows of sharp teeth. This is my territory. Everything here belongs to me. You will pay tribute. Half of your food. Half of your equipment. 10 of your young ones to serve in my household. He stepped closer, towering over her. This is not negotiable. Elena felt her heart pounding, but she kept her voice steady. And if we refuse... Skarn grabbed her by the throat and lifted her off the ground. She choked, struggling for air. Then I will burn your settlement to ash. I will take your people as slaves. The children will watch their parents die before I sell them to the mining colonies. He threw her to the ground. You have 1 hour to prepare my tribute. The Dreith turned and walked back toward their ship. They moved slowly, confident. They had done this 1,000 times before. Every species in the galaxy feared them. Elena picked herself up from the dirt. Her neck was bruised, and blood dripped from a cut on her cheek. She walked back through the gates and found Okonkwo waiting. You heard? She asked, every word. His face was stone. What are your orders, Captain? Elena looked at the archers assembled behind the walls. 200 men and women, each holding a bow of steel and carbon fiber. They were afraid. She could see it in their eyes. But they were also angry. We do not pay tribute to slavers, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. We do not surrender our children. We do not bow. Okonkwo handed her a bow. She took it and climbed the stairs to the top of the wall. The archers followed, taking positions along the ramparts. The Dreith were gathered near their ship, waiting for the humans to bring gifts. Skarn stood in the center, arms crossed, a smile on his scarred face. Lieutenant, Elena called down. Sound the horn. A deep blast echoed across the valley. The Dreith looked up, confused. This was not the sound of surrender. Archers! Okonkwo's voice boomed across the walls. Draw. 200 bows rose as one. 200 arrows pointed at the sky, angled toward the enemy below. Skarn's smile faded. He squinted at the walls, trying to understand what he was seeing. Those stakes could not be weapons. The council had banned all weapons. His scanners had detected nothing dangerous on this moon. Loose! The arrows flew. They made no sound except a soft whistle as they cut through the air. Skarn did not even have time to react before the first arrow struck his lieutenant in the skull. The tungsten tip punched through bone like it was paper. The massive Dreith fell without a cry. Then the rest of the volley arrived. Arrows rained down on the syndicate warriors. Steel tips found gaps in scales. pierced eyes and throats and joints. The Dreeth roared in confusion and pain. They were warriors who had never faced projectile weapons. They did not know to take cover. They did not know to raise shields. 15 of them died in the first volley. The survivors charged toward the walls, howling for blood. But the archers were already knocking new arrows. Second volley. Draw. Loose. More Dreeth fell. The distance closed, but not fast enough. By the time they reached the walls, only 20 remained. Okonkwo jumped down from the rampart, a short sword in one hand and a knife in the other. Other humans followed, men and women who had trained for close combat. The Dreeth were bigger and stronger, but they were wounded and confused. The fight at the base of the walls was brutal and short. Dreeth claws tore through armor. Human blades found vital points. When it was over, the ground was covered with bodies. Skarn was the last one standing. Arrows stuck out of his shoulder and leg. Blood poured from a dozen wounds. But he still fought, swinging his plasma whip in wild arcs. Okonkwo faced him alone. The warlord was twice his size, a monster of muscle and scale. But Okonkwo had been waiting for this moment his entire life. "You cannot kill me, human," Skarn snarled. "I am Dreeth. I am a god." Okonkwo raised his bow, drew the string back to his cheek, aimed. "You are meat," he said. The arrow flew. It entered Skarn's left eye and exited the back of his skull. The warlord of the Dreeth Syndicate fell face first, into the dirt of Keller's moon. He did not move again. Silence fell over the battlefield. The humans stood among the bodies of their enemies, covered in blood and dust. They were shaking with exhaustion and fear and something else. Something powerful. Elena climbed down from the wall and walked to where Skarn lay. She looked at his body for a long moment, then turned to face her people. "Today we learned something," she said. "We learned that we are not helpless. We learned that the old weapons still work. And we learned that we will never bow to those who would enslave us." She raised her bow to the sky. "Today the galaxy learns to fear humanity." The archers roared. Their voices echoed off the mountains and rose toward the stars. Somewhere out there, other species heard the news. A new power had arrived. A power that fought without guns, without mercy, and without fear. The age of the bow had begun. News traveled fast in the galaxy. Within days, every station and colony in the outer regions knew what had happened on Keller's moon. The story grew with each telling. Some said the humans had killed 100 Dreeth. Others claimed they possessed magic weapons that struck from the shadows. Fear and wonder spread in equal measure. The Dreeth Syndicate was in chaos. Skarn had been their unquestioned leader for 60 years. Without him, the warlords under his command turned on each other, fighting for control. For the first time in centuries, their grip on the outer colonies loosened, and the refugees began to arrive. The first ship landed at New Haven on a rainy morning. It was small and battered, barely holding together. When the hatch opened, Elena saw creatures she had never encountered before. They were small, barely reaching her waist, with feather bodies and large round eyes. Their wings were clipped, the feathers torn out so they could never fly. "We are Minari," said their leader. Her voice was soft and musical despite the pain in her eyes. "We heard what you did to the Dreeth. We came to ask for shelter." Elena knelt to meet her gaze. "What happened to your wings?" "The slavers cut them. They said birds should not fly. They said we should only serve." The Minari trembled. "We escaped from a transport ship. 12 of us. We are all that is left of our colony." Elena felt something hot rise in her chest. Anger. Pure and righteous anger. "You are welcome here," she said. "No one will hurt you again." More ships followed. The Gorath came next, a species of tall, thin beings with gray skin and 6 eyes. They had once been warriors, proud and fierce. But the syndicates had conquered their homeworld generations ago. Now they worked as slaves in mines and factories across the region. "We have nothing," said their leader, a male named Threk. His body was covered in scars from years of beatings. "No weapons, no ships, no hope. But we heard about the humans. We heard you fight." Okonkwo stepped forward. In his hands, he held a crossbow. It was a beautiful weapon, carved from dark wood and reinforced with steel. He offered it to Threk. "Can you learn to use this?" Okonkwo asked. Threk took the crossbow with trembling hands. He examined it carefully, testing the string, feeling the weight. Something changed in his 6 eyes. The deadness faded. A spark appeared. For a chance to fight back? Threk's voice cracked. "I will learn anything." The training began immediately. Okonkwo worked day and night, teaching archery to anyone who wanted to learn. The Minari were small, but they were quick and had excellent aim. He designed lightweight bows for them, weapons they could fire while perched in high places. The Gorath were slow, but incredibly strong. Their crossbows had draw weights that would break a human's arms. "The bow does not care about your species," Okonkwo told them during training. "It does not care about your size or your strength or your past. It only asks that you practice, that you focus, that you never give up." Within weeks, New Haven had tripled in size. Other species arrived. The Velki, small insectoid creatures who had been used as disposable workers. The Dramani, aquatic beings forced to live in tiny tanks as entertainment. The Sithari, distant cousins of Ambassador Thelvara's species, who had refused to join the council and paid the price. Each species brought skills and knowledge. The Gorath knew how to forge metal. The Minari could see in complete darkness. The Velki worked together with perfect coordination. Together, they built New Haven into something greater than a settlement. It became a fortress. A symbol. Elena stood on the walls one evening, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Okonkwo joined her, as he often did. "We have over 1,000 fighters now," he reported. 300 humans, 400 Gorath, 200 Minari, and smaller groups from a dozen other species. All trained with bows or crossbows. And our enemies? The remaining syndicates are watching. They are afraid to attack, but they are also afraid to show weakness. Eventually, they will unite against us. Elena nodded. "Then we need allies. Real allies, not just refugees. We need to build a coalition." She called a meeting that night. Representatives from every species in New Haven gathered in the central hall. Elena stood before them and spoke plainly. "We are all here because we refuse to be victims. We refuse to bow, but we cannot survive alone. The syndicates will come for us eventually, and when they do, they will come in force." She paused, looking at each face in turn. "I propose we form an alliance, not just for defense, but for freedom. Every species that stands with us will be protected by all of us. Our archers will fight for anyone who needs help." Threk rose to his feet. "The Gorath stand with humanity. You gave us weapons when we had none. You gave us hope when we had forgotten what it meant." The Minari leader, who had taken the name Sira, spread her damaged wings. "My people were taught to fear. Now we are learning to fight. The Minari stand with humanity." One by one, every species in the room pledged their loyalty. They called themselves the Free Bow Coalition. Their flag showed an arrow pointing toward the stars, but their growing strength had not gone unnoticed. Ambassador Thelvara's ship arrived at New Haven the following week. She came with an escort of Vethrani peacekeepers, their crystal bodies gleaming in the pale light. Elena met them at the landing platform. "Captain Vasquez," Thelvara said. Her voice was as cold as ever. "Or should I call you General?" You seem to have built quite an army here. These are refugees. They came to us seeking safety. They came to you seeking weapons. Weapons you have been distributing freely to any species that asks. Delver a step closer. You are destabilizing the region. The Council is concerned. Elena did not flinch. The Council should be concerned about the slavers who prey on innocent people, the pirates who raid settlements, the criminals who operate freely because your disarmament. Accord made everyone helpless. The Accord exists to prevent war. The Accord disarmed the prey and told them to trust the predators. Elena gestured toward the walls, where archers from a dozen species stood watch. We are simply reminding everyone that the prey can bite back. Delvara studied her for a long moment. Then she produced a datapad from her robes. The Council has voted. They are calling for a ban on tension-based projectile systems. Bows, crossbows, and all similar weapons will be added to the prohibited list. Elena felt her stomach drop. Without their bows, the coalition would be defenseless once more. The vote requires approval from 2/3 of member species, Delvara continued. It will be held in one standard month. Then, we have 1 month to change their minds. Delvara raised one eyebrow. And how do you intend to do that? Elena smiled grimly. By showing them what happens when good people are given the right to defend themselves. The ambassador departed without further comment. But Elena noticed something strange as her ship lifted off. Thelvara had looked back at the walls, at the archers standing proud and ready. And for just a moment, her expression had shown something other than cold disapproval. It had shown respect. Word spread through the galaxy that the Council would vote on banning bows. Species who had lived in fear for centuries began to watch closely. Some traveled to New Haven to see the coalition for themselves. What they found surprised them. They found humans and aliens working together as equals. They found the weak learning to be strong. They found hope. By the time the vote came, 17 species had joined the Free Bow Coalition. 17 voices stood against the ban. It was enough to block the motion. The ancient law remained unchanged. In the outer colonies, the oppressed began to whisper a new phrase. They said it in cargo holds and slave barracks and mining tunnels. They said it like a prayer. The humans are coming, and they bring bows. The syndicates had been patient long enough. For months, they watched the Free Bow Coalition grow stronger. They saw their slaves escape to Keller's moon. They watched their territory shrink as oppressed species rose up against them. And they grew afraid. Fear made them dangerous. Warlord Drexer of the Crimson Fang Syndicate called the meeting. He was a Dreeth like Skarn had been, but older and more cunning. At his side stood the leaders of 6 other criminal organizations. Together, they commanded nearly 50 warships and over 10,000 warriors. The humans must die, Drexer said. His voice echoed through the metal chamber of his flagship. While they live, our slaves dream of freedom. While they live, our victims believe they can fight back. We will erase them from existence. The Council forbids open warfare, said one of the other warlords, a serpentine creature called Visic. If we attack with weapons, the peacekeepers will respond. Drexer smiled, showing rows of cracked teeth. No weapons. No plasma. No energy blasters. We will do this the old way. Claws and blades and overwhelming numbers. 10,000 warriors against a few hundred archers. The Council cannot object to that. The other warlords agreed. Plans were made. Ships were gathered. Warriors were armed with nothing but their natural weapons and simple melee tools. Within weeks, the largest ground assault in decades was ready to launch. On Keller's moon, Elena knew they were coming. Coalition scouts had watched the syndicate ships gathering. They had counted the numbers. The reports were grim. 42 warships, said Okonkwo during the War Council. Between 9 and 11,000 ground troops, mostly Dreeth and Visari, with smaller numbers from other species loyal to the syndicates. The room was silent. Elena looked at the leaders gathered around the table. Threk of the Gorth, Sira of the Minari, a dozen others representing the species who had joined them. "How many fighters do we have?" she asked. 1,400 trained archers. Another 600 with basic skills. 2,000 against 10,000. The numbers were not good. "We cannot win a straight fight," Elena said. "So we will not fight one. We have had 6 months to prepare. Let us make them count." The preparations had begun months ago. Deep trenches had been dug around the settlement, lined with sharpened stakes. Kill zones had been mapped and marked, showing exactly where arrows would be most effective. Hidden platforms had been built in the cliffs for the Minari snipers. Underground tunnels connected every part of the defense. "They expect us to cower behind walls," Elena told her people on the eve of battle. "They expect us to beg for mercy. They expect easy prey." She gripped her bow tightly. "Let us teach them otherwise." The syndicate fleet arrived at dawn. 42 ships descended through the gray clouds like metal locusts. They landed in a wide formation around New Haven, surrounding the settlement on all sides. Warlord Drexer stepped off his flagship and looked at the walls of the human settlement. He saw figures moving behind the ramparts, but they seemed so few. "So small. Sound the advance," he commanded. "I want this finished before sunset." War drums thundered across the valley. 10,000 warriors began to march. They moved in waves, spreading out to attack from every direction at once. The ground shook beneath their feet. On the walls, human archers stood ready. Beside them were Gorath with heavy crossbows. Above them, hidden in the cliffs, Minari watched with sharp eyes. Behind them, in the tunnels, reserve forces waited for orders. Okonkwo stood at the eastern gate, where the largest force was approaching. He counted roughly 3,000 Dreeth warriors in the first wave. They roared as they came, beating their chests, certain of victory. "Hold," Okonkwo said calmly. "Wait for the markers." Red flags had been planted in the ground at precise distances from the walls. The archers knew exactly what each flag meant. The first wave reached the outer marker. 800 meters. "Hold, 600 meters." The Dreeth were running now, eager to reach the walls and tear them down. "Hold, 400 meters." The killing ground. "Draw." 1,000 bows rose as one. Arrows of tungsten steel glittered in the pale morning light. "Loose." The sky turned black with arrows. They fell upon the charging Dreeth like iron rain. Warriors stumbled and fell, arrows piercing skulls and throats and eyes. The formation shattered as survivors tried to find cover where there was none. Second volley. "Draw." "Loose." More arrows. More deaths. The Dreeth reached the trenches and found sharpened stakes waiting for them. They fell into pits hidden beneath thin covers. They triggered traps that sent boulders rolling down from the cliffs dotted in the north. The Gorath crossbow division held the line. Their weapons fired bolts as thick as a human's thumb, bolts that could pierce 2 bodies at once. Each Gorath archer had engraved their bolts with names of loved ones lost to slavery. Every shot was personal dot in the south. The Minari snipers targeted officers and leaders. Their arrows were smaller, but incredibly accurate. Syndicate commanders fell one by one, leaving their troops confused and leaderless. Warlord Drexer watched the slaughter from a safe distance, his face twisted with rage. This was not how it was supposed to happen. These were supposed to be easy victims. "Send the second wave?" he screamed. "All of them. Overwhelm the walls." 5,000 more warriors charged forward. They climbed over the bodies of their fallen comrades. They pushed through the trenches, despite the arrows falling among them. Some reached the walls and began to climb. Elena drew her bow and fired into the mass of bodies below. Beside her, archers fought with grim determination. Arrows ran low. Hands bled from pulling bowstrings too many times. "They are breaching the eastern wall," someone shouted. "They are breaching the eastern wall," someone shouted. Elena looked and saw Dreath warriors pouring over the ramparts. The archers could not stop them all. "Reserves," she commanded. "Tunnel exits, now." The hidden tunnels opened. Fresh coalition fighters emerged behind the invaders, catching them between two forces. The fighting at the walls became brutal and close. Swords and axes replaced bows. Blood mixed with the dirt. Threk led the Gorath charge personally. He fought with a massive axe taken from a fallen enemy, cutting through Dreath warriors like a machine. His 6 eyes blazed with fury. Every swing was a memory of chains and whips and endless labor. "For our dead," he roared. "For our children." The Gorath followed him into battle, screaming with voices that had been silent for too long. Hours passed. The sun crossed the gray sky and began to descend. The Syndicate forces pushed forward, then fell back, then pushed again. Bodies covered the ground so thickly it was difficult to walk. Drexer watched his army crumble. 6,000 dead. Maybe more. And the walls still stood. "Enough," he growled. He drew his ceremonial blade, a weapon passed down through generations of Dreath warlords. "I will finish this myself." He strode toward the battle, pushing through the retreating warriors. His presence rallied them. They turned and followed, shame giving way to renewed fury. Drexer was the greatest warrior among them. With him leading, they could not lose. The warlord cut through the first defenders he met. His blade was a blur of death. He reached the walls and began to climb, ignoring the arrows that bounced off his thick scales. Okonkwo saw him coming. He had been waiting for this moment. "Keep them busy," he told his archers. Then he jumped down from the wall and walked toward the approaching monster. Drexer landed heavily on the inside of the wall. He looked around and saw one human standing alone, a bow in his hands. "You are the one who killed Skarn," Drexer said. "His spirit cries out for vengeance." "Then come and collect it," Drexer charged. He was faster than any creature his size had a right to be. His blade swung in a horizontal arc meant to cut Okonkwo in half. But Okonkwo was no longer there. He rolled under the swing and came up behind the warlord. His hand moved to his quiver, drew an arrow, nocked it, and released in one smooth motion. The arrow struck Drexer in the back of the knee, where the scales were thinnest. The warlord stumbled. Another arrow hit his shoulder, then his hip, then his other knee. Drexer fell to his knees, crippled but still alive. He looked up at the human with disbelief. "What are you?" he gasped. Okonkwo drew one final arrow. "We are humanity. We are what happens when you corner a species that has been fighting since before we discovered fire." He released the arrow. It struck Drexer between the eyes. The warlord's body hit the ground. Across the battlefield, his warriors saw him fall. Their morale shattered. They broke and ran, fleeing toward their ships, abandoning their dead and wounded. The coalition archers fired until there was no one left to shoot. When the last syndicate ship lifted off and disappeared into the clouds, a strange silence fell over the battlefield. Elena lowered her bow and looked around at the destruction. Bodies covered everything. The ground was red with blood from a dozen species. But the wall stood. New Haven stood. The coalition survived. Syrah landed beside her, small wings working hard to keep her aloft. "We won," the Minari said. Her voice was full of wonder. "We actually won." Elena nodded slowly. "We won. but this is just the beginning. She looked up at the sky, where the last of the enemy ships were vanishing. The galaxy is watching. What they saw here today will change everything. She was right. Within hours, reports of the battle spread across the stars. The story was simple but powerful. 2,000 archers had defeated 10,000 warriors. The syndicates had been humiliated. The Freebow Coalition had proven that freedom could not be crushed. And in quiet corners of the galaxy, the oppressed began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could win. The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with representatives from 347 species. Holographic displays showed the faces of those who attended remotely. Translators hummed in every language known to civilized space. This was the most important session in 12,000 years. At the center of the chamber, a massive screen showed images from Keller's moon, the aftermath of the battle. The trenches filled with bodies. The walls still standing with arrows embedded in every surface. And the banners of the Freebow Coalition flying above it all. 6,000 dead, announced the council speaker, a massive crystalline being who served as the neutral voice of the assembly. The Dreeth Syndicate has been effectively destroyed. 4 other criminal organizations have dissolved. Slave populations across the outer colonies are rising against their masters. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some voices were angry. Others were afraid. A few seemed almost hopeful. The coalition must be stopped, declared Representative Morvax, speaking for a faction of wealthy trading species. They are disrupting galactic stability. Their weapons must be banned immediately. Weapons that kill without chemicals or propellants are not covered by the accord, responded another delegate. We tried to pass a ban. It failed. The law is clear. Then change the law. The arguments continued for hours. Species shouted at each other across the chamber. Ancient alliances threatened to break. It seemed like the council might tear itself apart. Then Ambassador Thelvar rose to speak. The chamber fell silent. The Scythians were one of the founding species of the council. When they spoke, others listened. Thelvar walked slowly to the center platform. Her 4 arms were folded behind her back. Her dark eyes swept across the assembly with calm authority. 12,000 years ago, my ancestors helped create the Disarmament Accord. They believed they were ending war. They believed they were creating lasting peace. She paused, letting the weight of history settle over the room. They were wrong. Shocked whispers filled the air. Thelvar raised one hand for silence. The accord did not end violence. It simply changed who held the power. We disarmed the peaceful and told them to trust in the law. We disarmed the weak and told them the strong would protect them. But the law only works if it is enforced. And we did not enforce it in the places where it mattered most. She gestured toward the screen, where images of liberated slaves celebrating their freedom played on repeat. The outer colonies have been ruled by fear for centuries. Slavers operated openly. Pirates raided settlements. Criminal syndicates controlled entire sectors. And what did the council do? Her voice sharpened. We told the victims that weapons were barbaric. We told them to file complaints through proper channels. We told them to wait for help that never came. Thelvar turned to face the delegates directly. Then the humans arrived. They had nothing but wooden sticks and metal strings. Primitive tools from their ancient past. And with those tools, they did what we could not. They freed the slaves. They defeated the syndicates. They gave the helpless a way to fight back. She walked toward the coalition delegation, where Elena Vasquez sat with representatives from 20 species. The human captain rose to meet her. I owe you an apology, Thelvar said, loud enough for the whole chamber to hear. When we first met, I saw you as primitives. Violent creatures who had not learned civilized ways. I was blind. Elena nodded slowly. You were doing what you believed was right. The accord worked for your people. It just did not work for everyone. Delvara turned back to the council. The humans did not bring war to our galaxy. The war was already here. They simply reminded us that the right to defend oneself is not primitive. It is fundamental. She activated her personal console and projected a document into the air above her. I propose the new accord. It maintains the ban on advanced projectile weapons. No guns, no missiles, no weapons of mass destruction. But it recognizes the right of self-defense. Any species may arm themselves with basic projectile weapons, including bows, crossbows, and similar tools. Any species may fight to protect their homes, their families, and their freedom. The chamber erupted into debate once more. But this time, the tone was different. Species who had suffered under syndicate rule spoke in favor of the proposal. Those who had watched the coalition with admiration added their voices. Slowly, a consensus began to form. The vote was called at sunset. 218 species in favor, 129 against. The new accord passed into galactic law. Alina watched the final count appear on the screen. She felt tears forming in her eyes, but blinked them back. There was still too much work to do for celebration. Thalvara approached her after the session ended. The council has one more proposal for you, Captain Vasquez. We would like to establish a peacekeeping force for the outer colonies. A force that uses the methods your people have developed. We are calling it the Bowman Initiative. You want humans to train peacekeepers? We want the coalition to do it. Humans, Gorath, Minari, all of you together. You have proven that different species can fight side by side as equals. We want that example to spread. Elena considered the offer. What about the people who voted against the new accord? They will not accept human instructors easily. Then we will be patient. Change comes slowly in the galaxy. But it comes... Salvara extended one of her 4 hands. What do you say, Captain? Will you help us build something better? Elena took her hand. We will. The news of the new accord spread across the stars within days. In slave barracks and mining colonies, in cargo holds and service decks, the oppressed heard that they now had a legal right to arm themselves. They heard that help was coming. The coalition grew rapidly. New species joined every week, seeking training and protection. The Bowman Initiative established academies on a dozen worlds, teaching archery and self-defense to anyone who wanted to learn. Okonkwo became the head instructor. He refused all official titles and ceremonies, preferring to spend his time on the training grounds with students from across the galaxy. One morning, a young Minari approached him after practice. Her wings had grown back over the past year, beautiful purple feathers that shimmered in the light. She held her bow with confidence now, her form nearly perfect. "Teacher," she said, "may I ask you something?" Okonkwo set down his own bow. "Of course." The other species. They struggle with the bow. The Gorath are slow. The Velki cannot hold the string properly. Even my people, with our sharp eyes, take months to become accurate. She tilted her head, curious. But humans learn quickly. You adapt to any weapon as if you were born holding it. Why? Okonkwo smiled. It was a question he had been asked many times. Our ancestors lived on a dangerous world, he said. Every creature was a threat. Every day was a fight for survival. Other species evolved to flee or hide. Humans evolved to hunt. We developed hands that could grip any tool, eyes that could track any prey, minds that could adapt to any situation. He picked up his bow and drew an imaginary arrow. When we invented the bow, 50,000 years ago, it changed everything. Suddenly, we could kill from a distance. We could bring down creatures 10 times our size. We spread across our entire planet in just a few thousand generations. He released the imaginary string. The bow is not just a weapon to us. It is part of who we are. It is written into our blood and bones. The young Minari looked at her own weapon with new appreciation. Then, why do you teach us? If the bow is so special to humans, why share it? Okonkwo placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Because weapons do not make a species strong. Courage does. Compassion does. The willingness to stand up for others, even when you are afraid. He nodded toward the training grounds, where students from a dozen species practiced together. You have all of those things. The bow is just a tool. What matters is the heart behind it. The Minari straightened with pride. Then we will make you proud, teacher. You already have. That evening, Okonkwo stood on the observation deck of the academy. The sky was clear, and the stars stretched out endlessly above him. Somewhere out there, new colonies were being founded. New species were discovering the galaxy. New challenges waited to be faced. Elena joined him, as she often did. Years had passed since they first arrived at Station Nexus 7. Her hair was gray now, but her eyes were still sharp. The Council approved the new territories, she said. 7 worlds reserved for freed slave populations. The Bowman Initiative will provide security. Good. Okonkwo did not turn from the stars. There is still so much work to do. There always will be. But we have made a difference. That counts for something. He nodded slowly. When we left Earth, I wondered if humanity would ever find a place among the stars. We were newcomers, primitives. Nobody expected anything from us. And now? Okonkwo finally turned to face her. His weathered face creased into a rare smile. Now they know. They took our guns, thinking they had disarmed us. They forgot that humans have been warriors since the beginning. We fought with rocks. We fought with spears. We fought with swords and arrows and siege engines. Every time someone told us we could not fight, we proved them wrong. They looked back at the stars, at the endless possibilities waiting in the darkness. The galaxy thought they had tamed us. They were wrong. We are humanity. We adapt. We survive. We protect the ones we love. His hand rested on the bow at his side. The same bow he had carried since leaving Earth. And we never, ever stop fighting for what is right. Far below, on the training grounds, a new class of archers was practicing. Humans and Gorath and Minari and a dozen other species, all learning the ancient art of the bow. Their arrows flew straight and true, carrying hope toward the future. The age of the bow had not just begun. It would last forever.